The Late Mrs. Biggins is the 10th episode of the 3rd season of Wings. This is directed by Andy Ackerman, and as always, there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode and share some thoughts. And I thought it was a pretty decent episode. We only really have one main narrative. There are a few small things like Lowell sharing his dreams and pizza needing to be delivered from a restaurant, flying it in and then taxiing it across Nantucket, which seems excessive. But the main narrative focuses on Roy. Faye decides to set Roy up with her friend Doris. Roy isn't interested in this, but eventually he goes on a date with her and it wasn't great. And Faye points out that he has to stop comparing every woman he dates to his late wife Sylvia. She died 16 years ago, or so we believe. We very quickly learn that might not be the case, though. Somebody thought she was buried in Boston, somebody thought she was buried in Vermont, somebody else thought she was cremated. Roy has to confess that actually she's alive somewhere in Boston. And he goes outside, and it's nice to see Roy's vulnerabilities, because he often comes across as being a bit of a tough man who doesn't show his emotions, who doesn't have anything to worry about, but actually he does have his vulnerabilities. And Faye goes out to talk to him, and it's a really lovely scene, and Roy is stroking his hamster, which is actually the cutest thing ever. It's a little toy hamster his doctor advised he petted whenever he was stressed, which I have to say is very cute. And Faye gave him this really lovely talk, and it wasn't her intention to make Roy come to this conclusion, but Roy concluded that he should go to Boston and try and win back Sylvia. And he's about to go and do this, but when everybody else has left, he sneaks back inside because he's too afraid. But Brian is still there, so Brian gives him a nice talk as well. It's really great to see a lot of people really being there for Roy and supporting Roy, particularly as Roy is not necessarily the nicest to other people. That's definitely changed as the seasons have gone on. I feel like Roy, out of all of the characters, has had some really strong, very subtle, but strong at the same time, character progression. And by that I mean it's quite slow, but over time, just gradually, we seem to chip away at his tough exterior and dig a little bit deeper into him, and he seems to be nicer to people as time goes on. But he still feels enough like Roy from the earlier seasons. And Brian says, I'll fly you to Boston. So they go, and they were given Sylvia's address by, I believe, her brother, and they turn up at the house, and it's grand. It's expensive. It's beautiful. Very, very stunning. One of my favourite moments there is when Roy is clutching this tiny little bunch of flowers, and there's just this huge bouquet decorating the hallway. It's absolutely stunning. And Sylvia comes out eventually. She doesn't realise it's Roy. She thinks it's Roy, her dog groomer. But she comes out and sees Roy, and she does come off as cold. But at the same time, I don't think her reactions or the way she spoke were unreasonable. I think those things were pretty fair for somebody who walked out on an unhappy marriage and has reinvented herself, basically, over the last 16 years. She's been married for 12 years. Roy is nothing in her current life. And she wasn't nasty about him in the sense that she was calling him names and being really bitter towards him. She was just very matter-of-fact about things, and I think it was definitely very believable. But also, I didn't want Roy to feel hurt, and that definitely was the case. And Roy ends up leaving by kind of storming out, but he kind of stormed out into the closet. And he leaves with Brian, and it's not the happiest ending, but it worked well. And he left with Pavarotti's coat, because Sylvia was in the middle of hosting a cocktail party. Obviously, one of the guests being Pavarotti, definitely helping to suggest that she lives a very lavish lifestyle that is an entire world away from the life she had with Roy. And it was not a bad ending. I think it's probably things went as well as I think they could have done. It would have been very unbelievable if Roy went up to see her and she just kind of fawned all over him. So I think it worked out well, but not for Roy. But it is a good episode. It's really nice to learn a little bit more about Roy, a little bit about his history, and the petting of the hamster is just the cutest thing ever, and a bit of good advice as well. So definitely not a bad episode. The Late Mrs. Biggins is a pretty great episode of Wings.